Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Anne Blaney. I also go by Annie B. Knits, and my pronouns are she and her. I will be your host today. This is our final Meet the Designers um, Zoom panel for the Fasten Off Yarnalong 2023. I almost said 2024 because my brain has apparently already jumped to next year. But we are absolutely delighted to have you here. Um, we have with us today, I'm just going to drop their names and their links in the chat. We have with us today Bronwyn Hahn, also known as Bronwyn the Brave. We have Sandra Conway, we have Corey Eichelberger, and we have Mary W. Martin. And so I put all of everybody's links in the chat. I'm just admitting a couple more people. Here we go. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have us all just go around for the designers to introduce ourselves. And since I have names in an order in the chat there, Bronwyn, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us something about yourself as a designer, as a maker?
Sure. I'm a knitter and crocheter. I'm self-taught, so I always try to keep that in mind as I'm writing my patterns. And as I'm designing, I think through what might be challenging for a newer knitter. And I like to incorporate little teachable moments. So I don't want I don't want it to be an excuse of I don't know how for not making one of my patterns. So I like to sneak those teachable moments in anytime I can. So I include good descriptions and links to videos, little mnemonics that I might have as I'm knitting it myself. Anything that will make the process more enjoyable, more, um, you know, successful, I guess. And I'm a tech editor too, so I like to I tend to carry over some of those editing skills over into my pattern writing as well. So
That's awesome. Lots of breadth of skills and depth of skills there as well.
yeah,
This
as a
is
tech
kind of
editor,
a
I see lots of other techniques too, so my mind is constantly like
yeah,
going.
yeah. This is kind of amazing because you're all actually in the order that you joined the Zoom call in. So Sandra, I'm going to turn to you next. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Sandra Conway. My designs are under Sandra Conway Design, so very inventive name. I am originally from Germany, but I've been living in Ireland for 17 years, so I might give the captions a challenge with my accent here and there. So let's see how that works. I've been knitting for over 15 years, and while I did take a course at the start, I was one of the people that didn't do a scarf or something simple. I straight away went to a cardigan and then basically didn't do any garments for like 12 years because it was a disaster. But that's me kind of when I'm knitting, I kind of like to jump into new things. So that's where, like in my designs as well, I try to encourage people to branch out of what they know. But at the same time, I like to go for effect with easy techniques. Have something that looks way more complicated than it actually is in the end.
That's fantastic. And so far the captions are doing beautifully with you, by the way. Corey, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, I'm Corey Eichelberger. I go by iRock Knits because iRock is my first name spelled backwards. And back in 1980 something, I saw the iRock Z28 Camaro and noticed that my name was on the side of the car. So that's where that comes from. I knit in a rocker recliner, so it's appropriate. I've been designing since full-time since 2015. Have written 2 knitting pattern books, and really do a lot more teaching than pattern writing. I mean, I do quite a bit of pattern writing, but I teach a lot. I teach a lot of beginners. We have 14 knitting stores in the Twin Cities of Minnesota within an hour and a half of my house. So I'm super lucky because I can kind of shot, hop from one to the next to do quite a bit of teaching, which I was a high school teacher for 17 years. It's kind of ironic, Sandra, because I still kind of identify as a high school teacher sometimes, but that's where my skill set lands. So yeah.
I am so jealous of that number of yarn shops.
I know. It's incredible.
That is absolutely amazing. And Mary, you are in a city with a bunch of lovely yarn shops as well. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mary Martin, and we have lots of lovely yarn shops in Toronto. Anne lives about, I think, a couple of hours away from me, and there's many yarn shops in between us too. So that's really nice. So I'm a designer in Toronto. I started designing mostly to design reversible knits, and I'm moving on from that right now. We'll see. But I specialize in something called fission knitting and fusion knitting, which are both reversible techniques.
Which are mind-blowing techniques, I have to say. Having taken a class with Mary, it's just all right. So I'm going to go around the same group and ask you the next question, which is, what is your favorite technique in your chosen craft? And if you knit and crochet, you can choose either. But do you have a favorite, a thing you gravitate to? I think I know Mary's answer. But Bronwyn, I'll start with you.
I don't use it all that often, but I'm completely fascinated by cables. I remember so clearly the first time I knit cables. I was making a hat for my son, and I had only been knitting a couple of months, but I turned to my husband. I'm like, oh, this is how it works. I was just like completely fascinated by it. And it's still it's entrancing to see how they weave back and forth. And it's just, whoever came up with it is like a genius, I think.
Agreed. Sandra, how about you?
Yeah, I'm actually going to second the cables. I think for me, because I draw a lot of inspiration from kind of Celtic patterns, so the cables kind of lent themselves to it. But for me also, like, it's these two techniques that a lot of my designs are as well, is mosaic knitting. And I actually have a few patterns that combine the two, so that you have the mosaic knitting, basically the slipped stitches, and you have the cables kind of running through it. So that, yeah, those two techniques kind of, I tend to gravitate towards them, although I do a bit of everything.
Okay. Corey, are you on team cables as well?
No. Color work, color. I'm all about color, bright colors. And color work is my favorite type of knitting to do. For myself, just when I'm knitting personally, but I also do quite a bit of color work in my designs. I write checklist patterns because I teach so many beginners and then they become advanced beginners. I write out every single line of instruction in my patterns because they're my biggest customer and they can't keep track of where they're at in a pattern and can't always read their knitting. So my patterns can get long and they don't knit a ton of color work, but that's what they aspire to getting to that point. So, but yeah, I'm all about two color, anything with lots of color.
Love it. And Mary, you've got cables and color behind you.
I have cables and colors behind me, but I do have to say my love is cables. Like, I've always loved the most complicated cables. I love anything Celtic design, Sandra. All those shapes are mesmerizing to me. And my techniques that I've developed have allowed me to use both color and cables. So I'm thrilled about that.
And they certainly do. And it's kind of related to mosaic work, what you do as well.
It is all slip stitches. So everything, I'm now working on another technique, and it once again is slip stitches and cables. I can't get away from that. Yeah.
Okay, we will come back to this new technique, as Kathleen says in the chat. Cannot wait to see. I have a suspicion based on what I've seen on your Instagram, but we will chat more about that in a minute. So the next question from our audience um, is, do you prefer designs that challenge you as a designer, or do you like simple things that you can crank out with relative ease? So Bronwyn, back over to you.
I would love to be one of those designers who can just recycle like a sock pattern and just, plug and play. But I always seem to reinvent the wheel. I don't know what it is. I always have I think last year I was talking about on this panel how I'm always inspired by words and pattern names. So I think that's where I drive from, and no word is identical to the next, right? But I yeah, I always have to come up with something different from my own value. But I would love to be one of those crank out the pattern designers. I'm lucky just to get a pattern out these days. So yeah.
I hear you there. Sandra?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the question ahead of time, and I don't think I'm a designer that seeks out the challenge. They seem to find me. So I'm similar to Bronwyn, that I seem to have ideas that I haven't seen done before, where I try to do something new. Some designs are simpler than others, but I think I would still consider myself a relative beginner, even though I've been doing it a few years, but I haven't put out that many patterns yet. So I still am at the stage where every design stretches me and where I can find improvements in every design. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice, right, Bronwyn, to have those kind of staples. I know I can bring it out in a few months, but maybe someday.
That is entirely fair. Corey, how about you?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach here. I think that it's really, really hard to make any money as a knitting designer. We're selling patterns for $7. You have to sell thousands of patterns to make any money. So sometimes it is about trying to just bang out. I don't know very few designers that don't have another job or aren't being supported by someone else in their life. Like my husband is an executive. I'm able to do what I'm doing full time, but I'm not making a living at it, right? And so complicated designs take me much more time. And so I have to balance whether or not it's worth it. Like I have a great idea for a really complicated sweater, but if 3 people buy it and I make $21, not even $21, and I'm paying for tech editing, test knitters, photography, I can't put it out there. We're not, hate to say this about the rest of you, but we're not in the top 10 of the pattern people who are making thousands of dollars, those people that can put out anything. I love doing some interesting, innovative techniques. I think that's awesome, but it's not, in the bottom line, I have to kind of stick with simplifying for the audience that I have. If that kind of makes sense, it has to be economically beneficial in the long run. But I will also say, if you're starting from scratch, writing any pattern is never banging it out with ease, ever, for anybody, right? You have a skill set around writing simplistic instructions for complicated techniques that you have to, we all have to have that skill set, and it's never with ease, or we wouldn't need tech editors, right, Ron? I mean, if it was with ease, if we could do it, we wouldn't have to have tech editors and test knitters. So if
Absolutely.
those of you that know me well, I'm fairly opinionated about design and what it takes to do this, and how hard it can be, and how little we get as far as remuneration goes. And we just literally have to love the fact that we're putting something creative out into the world. And
Yeah,
that's really it's a creative act as opposed to a business decision in most cases.
Absolutely. But I was also thinking about the fact that because you spend so much of your time teaching and you're writing for the beginner knitters, it's not that the technique has to challenge you. It's working out the technique that's going to challenge them and then making it simple, which is itself a completely different challenge as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And Mary, back around to you.
So I would say that my approach to designing is that the part that I'm most interested in is creating a new technique. And so my patterns that I come up with are very much, often I come up with a more complicated one first, and then I start exploring ways to apply that technique in simpler forms. And that can be a bit of cranking it out. Like I feel like I'll come up with a stitch pattern that uses a technique of some sort. I'll stick it on a cowl, a scarf, various things. And that's to let people know in what forms they can use that technique. So I would say I find it challenging to figure out the new stuff, and I love that. But I also understand the need to create stuff for people to practice on.
Yeah, totally.
Can I just jump in on Mary here? Because
Yeah.
if you haven't taken a class from Mary on her knitting absolute creative mind of stitch patterning, you should. I took a class from her too, and it just blows your mind how amazing fission and fusion knitting is. So I just want to jump on that for all of you that have never taken a class from Mary, because her brain works in a different way than mine, and it's awesome.
It really is. It's
Thank
very,
you.
very true.
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, I mean, I knew
Anytime,
that Mary's answer.
Mary, anytime you need someone to kind of like talk about you, you just holler.
Yeah. I knew that Mary's answer for that was going to be a tech that she wants the challenge of the technique, but I love hearing too how you do flip it around, and I know because I've knit, the very most basic cowl in your technique, but now I feel that like I've got that, so I have this jumping off point, and now I'm looking at everything behind you and going, yeah, I can do that, I could do that, I could do that. Haven't done it yet. All right. So the next question that we have for all of our designers is one that has come from our audience this year. And it's, how do you decide what information about a pattern you put on whatever your sales platform is, and how do you make sure it's accessible? I think Ravelry created, as problematic as they are now, they created something that was very thorough in terms of creating their database. So when you go to list a pattern on Ravelry, it gives you all the fields that you are going to fill out. You are going to tell it your gauge. You're going to tell it what needle or hook size you need. You're going to tell it the techniques involved, the type of item that it is, all of those things. But when people create off Ravelry listings, and we don't necessarily have that framework, some people like a very minimal listing, so it doesn't scare people off. Some people put every piece of possible information in there. What is it that you focus on, and what is important for you to tell people about your patterns in your pattern listings, and how do you make that inclusive and accessible? Which is a big question. So Bronwyn, back around to you.
You're right. Ravelry was really good with that, with all the tags and forcing you to fill out all that information. And some platforms are better than others. I list my patterns on Ravelry, on PayHip, and on Lovecrafts, and each of them is different. but I usually do Ravelry first, and then some of that information is flooded over, and then I fill in the gaps where it's needed. So like, for me, the biggest thing is the marketing, the romance that gets you to even consider knitting or crocheting my pattern. So the story behind the design, and then I'll give the measurements, usually the yardage for the sizes that I have included, needle size, hook size, if that's one of the things that's in there. Any other notions that you might have. Um, I don't know that I'm covering everything, but I think I've got everything, like most of what I need covered. Um, so that's like the basic things, kind of the top matter of a pattern is what I'll include in that. So the yarn information, the needles and whatnot. So
Mhm. Yeah. Sandra?
Yeah, I want to say I learned how to pattern write on Ravelry. So I tend to try and include really as much information in my pattern listings as I can. I mean, everything that Bronwyn has stated, I kind of was nodding along to it as well. One thing that I like to include as well is yarn substitution information. So I tend to personally knit with a lot of kind of hand-dyed yarn and kind of locally produced yarn, but I know that's not in everybody's budget, especially with the world how it is at the moment. So I always try to give advice on kind of what kind of fiber to look out for, what kind of qualities of the yarn to look out for. And basically all of the information that I give in the pattern as well to help them make it, that's the information that I give on my sales pages, because I think that's so important to know up front. I mean, in terms of accessibility, I try to include, like, all of my new patterns have, for example, a low vision version in them. Once I learned how to do it, I always include them, but that obviously it makes the pattern accessible, but it doesn't necessarily make the pattern listing accessible. So I go through the check with my own website, hoping that it is accessible. I try to do my best, but we're all only human. So if there's ever a problem, I hope I can fix it as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And next up, Corey.
I know the question is specifically about like what we choose to share, but since they both kind of hit on the whole Ravelry and you talked about the filling it out, my biggest platform is Instagram. I share a ton of stuff there about designs and what I'm doing and how I'm designing, but also on my podcast. So I share my design process and like I'll talk about the yarns and how much you need. And I'm giving tons of information because I'm an oversharer and I talk a ton. So my podcast can get really long, but I know there's a bunch of people here who watch my podcast, and I think that they can then easier decide if they want to knit one of my designs because I've talked about it at length. Like I've shared where I got the yarn, how much drape, what colors would work, right? All of that kind of background information that you wouldn't get in just like a standard listing, right, on the front page of the pattern. As far as accessibility goes, I early on in my podcast, I wasn't even using captioning. I didn't even know, right? And so someone asked and I added captioning. And I think the more you know, the better you do. But I mean, we have a real problem with Ravelry, right? I mean, that's the whole, right? That's why you started the Fasten Off because people couldn't get on Ravelry and do the other ones. And so I think that they need to figure that out. They need to step up and figure out what they can do to help. I still have a friend who can't get on Ravelry at this point. She can't. She has a head injury and she gets a migraine every single time. And the first time it sent her to the hospital, right? So we have an issue with the accessibility. And I know that this picture, the whole question is bigger than that. But as far as like designers sharing, I think designers who are on Instagram Live or who are doing podcasts help those people who can't get it from a print version can't, don't get it from what they want to know more about the pattern. I know the person that answered, I was in the chat, whoever asked the question, said that she understands it's a big question. So maybe she could chime in too on if we're hitting what she's asking about, sharing. I know one of it is about, like, when I read the question, I thought she meant on our sales platform, like, what do we put on sale? We know that's not what she meant now, but like, I was like, oh, she asking me about like sales, like how we make sale, how we offer our patterns, but that's not really your question. So maybe I'm not hitting what she's asking, and I would be happy. I think we'd all be happy to do that if we're not.
Sure. Maybe I'll turn to Mary, and then Marika, if you want to pop on. I know it's late where you are, and you might be already in pajamas and whatever, but Mary?
So I find Ravelry a little frustrating, filling in all those fields that they want you to fill in when you write a pattern, because often I don't know what they're asking for, and sometimes I require different things, so it doesn't really fit. So I really kind of like the freedom of the notes section where you just write in words what you need. And so that's why I like the other platforms, because I worry about people who search by yardage or something, and they like, I don't know what because I often use multiple colors, I don't know how they want it specified and all those things. So I like that you can just write it in the way that best suits how to describe your pattern. So I like the freedom of not having all the Ravelry stuff. And just going back to what Corey's saying is, I think it takes time. Like I know these last few years I've had to learn so much stuff about talking on Instagram or making YouTube videos and all that. And those are all things that you do, or hopefully you do, to make what you're designing more accessible to people. Like for me, I really need people to understand my technique. So, but that does all take time to even learn how to upload a video and tag it correctly, and all those things that you need to do to provide all the other supports for a pattern. The other thing I have found recently that I really like to add to my patterns is a skill required. So I know they're likely learning new skills with mine, but maybe they really shouldn't be totally beginner knitters, and I should require some basic skills before they tackle my pattern. So I like to be able to write that in there.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Marika has answered in the chat. She says, you're definitely answering my questions. I found it hard to formulate, especially in English, which is not her first language. But I love how we touch the topic and the way that all of you agree it's important. She is one of the other co-organizers of the Yarnalong, so the name is familiar. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a single right answer. I don't think there's a wrong answer necessarily, but it's really interesting to think about how people process that, like it's not creating the discounts or anything like that, but creating the listing of the pattern and what is essential for folks to know about it. We are roughly at about the halfway point here, so I have two more questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So the next question is for each of you. Tell us about a design of yours that you think crafters would love to make, but that hasn't really taken off. Is there a baby of yours that isn't getting its share of the limelight that you'd love it to see? Bronwyn?
Well, here's a little secret. None of my patterns are really taken off. I would love to be one of those viral designers, but I'm not. But one of them that is I released about this time of year a few years ago. It's called Soft Reset. And I designed it kind of like as a palette cleanser. After a busy holiday season, after a busy, like a hard project that you've completed at work, or you just need something after a really intense project, maybe. It's a scarf or a cowl, and it's just like a 2-stitch 4-row repeat. It's really simple, and you can make it as long or as short as you want. It's like I said, it's a cowl or a scarf. I just actually made one for my husband because he's going back to work and it's freezing in his office. And so it's genderless essentially. But it's just something simple and you can do it in a couple of days. So that's mine. Soft Reset.
And I just found the link to it. There it is in the
Sorry, I
chat.
could have gotten that for you.
No, that's okay. Sandra, how about you?
Yeah, I decided actually to wear it. This shawl is called Talev, and just for your ease, and it's Talamh, because Irish names aren't necessarily spelled the way they're pronounced from with an English mind anyway. But yeah, this shawl from the very start, I've loved it. The idea, it has a sister shawl. So the Talamh means earth, as in like, the ground that you can touch with your fingers. And then it has a sister shawl called Tinna, which is fire. And fire, everybody has loved fire, but earth has not gotten that same love, which I find interesting. But it has lace and it has mosaic in here, 2-color mosaic. I've loved it from the start. I even got my sister to take beautiful pictures, and I learned the lesson that to non-knitters, it's not evident which one is the right side and which one is the wrong side of the work, because she did the entire photo shoot from the wrong side of the work. So, but yeah, we all took it in good humor.
That's funny. I knit a garment for my sibling, and they did their entire photo shoot with it inside out, which was okay. You like the exposed seams, cool. And Corey, how about you? Do you have a design that...
This is my favorite, one of my favorite designs. It's really washing out here. It's called the Corey Stories Cowl, and it's mini skeins. And the reason that I think no one knit it is because it has the word Intarsia in the description. And it's super fun. But if you've changed colors and stripes, where you start with a new color and end with an old color, you can do this because it only changes along the edge. So there's no, but it says Intarsia, and so it doesn't go anywhere. But everybody who's on the Zoom today, which aren't very many of you, I'm giving you a coupon code. If you use the coupon code Zoom, you'll get $5 off that pattern. So you can have it for a couple bucks, because I love it and I want a few more people to love it too.
That is lovely.
So I put a little incentive to like try the word Intarsia, because you have to switch when you get to the end of the row. But that's it. And it's just a really pretty lace pattern. Even if you don't wear a cowl, you could do it as a scarf. You don't have to join it in the round. Yeah. So Corey's Stories, which happens every week on my podcast. I tell a story about something that's happened in my life. And ironically, since I started my podcast 5 years ago, something crazy has happened every 2 weeks. Right, Rosie? Like, I always have an obnoxious or crazy or silly or stupid story that has happened to me or my family or someone I know. So I named it the Corey Stories Cowl because I tell a Corey story every podcast.
That's amazing. I stuck the link and wrote out the coupon code. Unless it's case sensitive.
Well, better, because we don't have that many people here, so I thought I'll just...
That's lovely. This is going up on YouTube, so we can talk afterwards.
That's fine. No, it's fine.
Okay, cool.
Give it some love.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's
It's
lovely.
not new. No one else, like people aren't going to go out suddenly and start buying that cowl, right? Like it would have to be re-released and make the front page. It's just
Yeah,
not happening. So
All right. Well, that's fantastic.
give it some love. It can go out
and-
there to all the Fasten Off people who watch it later.
And very generous of you. Mary, how about you? Is there a pattern in your repertoire that you wish got more attention?
No, not really. Like, I'd love for them all to get more attention. It's really hard like when you release a pattern to know what's going to do well and what isn't. And I think because some of my patterns, I know the ones that have a real wow factor are really hard, and can scare people off. So so I'm like, you know what, I'm putting the patterns out there to have people know that this technique exists. So I'm not really disappointed in any of it. Like, that wasn't the goal. So if I have to talk about a pattern that I would like more people to know about, I think it would have to be this one right behind me, which I call True Colors. And you knit in 6 colors all at the same time. And what's surprising about this is that it's actually fairly easy to do. So it doesn't have cables, and it's officially fission knitting because I work in a marl, but it's kind of one of those patterns that if you haven't done my work, it is kind of mind-blowing because you're working in 6 colors. But it has gotten a lot of attention, so it's not really fair to say I would like it to have more attention, but I also bring it up because will always be a fundraising scarf for the LGBT youth line here in Ontario. So it's kind of just a special one for me.
I love that one. And I have a friend who's a yarn dyer who has a version of that
But that's her
scarf
yarn as well.
in her that is her
That
yarn.
is her yarn.
And
Yeah.
and she has a version of that in her booth, and I go help out at festivals when I'm not organizing the festivals. I go booth babe for her, and I get to talk to people about it and just explaining it to them, and you can just see the light bulb go off. So they're like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing. I got it. And it's brilliant, and it's such a great impact. Plus the braids of like 6 colors of yarn are incredibly appealing to my little color geek heart. All right. There we go. I have put all of those links into the chat. So now the final of our planned questions is, what are we going to see from you next? So I will turn back again to you, Bronwyn.
Well, I'm always like way behind on my designs. But what I've been working on here lately is a cowl design. I don't know if it'll show up here. It's called the scenic route cowl, scenic route, however you want to pronounce that. It's a stockinette, and then you pick up stitches to follow your path. So that's
fun.
Yeah.
I like that. Cheryl Lines is excited about that one too. Sandra, how about you?
Yeah, I'm showing off the next 2 that are coming out. So they are almost entirely written. So this one will take about 3 skeins of DK, can be made in different colors. I have 2 versions of it, one in multicolor and one actually in one skein that just had a color progression. And that one up there takes 2 skeins of fingering weight, or sorry, 2 skeins in the blue color, and then 1 skein in, mine is a rainbow skein there, which had 20% sparkle in it. But yeah, they're both almost entirely written. I'm doing the finishing touches and, getting a pattern translate, because all my patterns are available in English and German as well. And then in low vision, that's kind of always what that takes kind of the bulk of the writing work to kind of get the different pattern versions ready. But yeah, they potentially one of them might be ready in the next few days, depending how the weather is for pictures of this one, because that's been stubborn on pictures so far.
So tell me, just out of interest, when you do the pattern translation, do you do that after it's been tech edited, or do you do it before it's tech edited and then have each version edited? How does that work?
So they get the English version tech edited, and then the German version. So I translated myself into German, and then I just have the German version proofread, because once I have the tech editing done for the numbers, I'm confident in the numbers. And I don't currently work as a tech editor, but I have worked as a tech editor. So I'm kind of happy to do the check of like, this says knit 8. Does this say 8 right? In German. And but yeah, other than that, I would always, like, English is in my brain, so I do the tech editing in English and then get it over into German afterwards.
Wow, that's a whole other skill set. That's amazing. Corey, how about you? What's next from you?
That's incredible, Sandra. That you do that. And Bronwyn, I love the cowl. I love the cowl. So that needs to happen. So you need to pull an all-nighter and just get it done. Come on, girlfriend. I made my list, my 2024 design list, of all the things that have, been sitting there in my head, and things that need to get done. But what I did yesterday before we left was I'm updating some old felting patterns that I have out on Ravelry, because I taught felting back in the craze. And I kind of see some people starting to felt again. And I do think we have a lot of new knitters in the, newer knitters in the world that have never felted an item. And so I'm going to start updating some of those felted items. But the item is a felted watermelon bag, and it is out there right now for free. And it was written 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So there's a recipe there, but I'm updating it to a checklist pattern, and it won't take too long, because people have knit it and stuff. So I just thought I would kind of look at some of those designs that are sitting there that I wrote a long time ago to see if they have any value still, because the shelf life of a pattern, you just wonder. I think the shelf life of most of my patterns is about 2 weeks right now. Like, they come out, they're popular for 5 minutes, or I sell a few, and then they trickle in after that, but it's kind of gone. So, but I have a couple of hats, a sweater, a poncho, a hooded poncho. What else is out that I have on my list? So I have a huge list for 2024. And I'm just booking all my teaching right now. And so I'm doing a couple of events for Interweave Yarn Fest. They're kind of, they're kind of taking over from where Stitches has left us all sad, right? Like, we won't have those events. And so the Interweave people are stepping up, and they're offering a number of events around the country. I do their event in Loveland, Colorado in April, and then they have one in Milwaukee at the end of May that I'm not doing, and then I'm doing one in Pennsylvania. Where am I going? Somewhere near Philadelphia, I think, in like August. And then I think they did like a New Mexico this fall, but I had my shoulder replaced. So if you're looking for a really nice event, and what they started doing in Loveland is they partnered with a sewing machine company, and they're doing sewing classes and having all kinds of quilting and sewing at the same time as the knitters are having knitting classes. So, and I think that there is some crossover there, right, between crafters, knitting, and sewing. So you could literally take a sewing class and then walk down the hall and and the vendor market is amazing. So I just thought I'd share that. I'm not they're not, paying me, right? I just thought I'd plug it, because I don't think a lot of people have, have gotten on the bandwagon. We know that Vogue and Stitches were kind of the the big ones every year that had them around the country, and now Stitches is gone. And I'm literally in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where XRX, you know, was and had and went belly up and closed their doors suddenly. And so it's really sad. It was sad for the people in this city, and where they just completely filed bankruptcy and left a lot of people high and dry and owing a lot of people money, which is really, really a bummer. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I will be teaching quite a bit. I have a Dallas Knitting Guild. In January and February, I'm doing the Dallas Knitting Guild, speaking, talking, doing Latvian braids and 2-color cast on and stuff like that. Next Tuesday, and then the first Tuesday of February. So I have a couple of online gigs going for that too. So teaching and designing.
Fantastic. And yeah, I think you're right about seeing felting stuff come back. I've been seeing more of that too. Pro tip, don't do what I did for my first felted thing, which was I used Icelandic Lopi yarn in a lovely sort of olive green color, and it felt extremely well. I made a bag, and it felted up super, super thick, but also incredibly furry because there's like long fibers sticking out. So we call it Oscar the Pouch. It just really needs some googly eyes needle felted onto it because it is hilarious and awful. Not quite what I was imagining as I was making
You
it,
need an
but it was,
industrial strength shaver.
yeah, you know what, I've been over it with
Yeah,
scissors
no.
and literally given it a haircut, and it's still, yeah, it
Yeah,
looks like
no.
fun fur. But yes,
Which
felting
was
is,
a thing, right? You could have gotten away with it in the 80s.
I mean, heck, I learned to knit in the sort of 2004, 2005 era when fun for everything was a thing.
Yep. Yep.
Fun for CD player cases, like fun for Discman cases and all of those fun things. Yeah. Anyway, Mary, you hinted that you have a new technique coming up. So
You have a new
what are we
technique.
going to see from you next?
Well, I'll show you first the patterns that are coming out in January, because this is kind of representative of what I do. So this is, so it's going to be 4 patterns. There's a cowl, a scarf, a blanket, and a wrap. And the wrap is kind of the most difficult of them. And what I've done is I've taken my fusion technique and I've made it a lot easier. And then in doing that, I took one of my tech motifs that people really liked, and I tried to put it on different surfaces. And what's interesting about this is you cast on the middle of this thing with the Judy's Magic cast on. And this is actually worked in the round, and you end up with pie-shaped ends, and it just goes around and around. But this technique, you go around in a very strange way. So
Aw.
so this is kind of what I consider the hardest of the collection, but then I also put out something that would be the easiest of the collection, which would be a cowl and this stitch pattern is just easy to memorize. And I do this, and especially the cowl, I do it because you can, like, this has a really small pattern repeat, so you can make it any size you want, and you can do it out of any yarn you want, because we can handle a cowl in any size, basically. So that's the kind of what I mean by taking a harder technique and also providing people steps in an easier way. So I would say, if you've never touched my work, if you want to do the wrap, you might try making a very tiny cowl first. So that's what's coming up in January. My new technique, once again, takes cables and slip stitches, and I'm trying to weave on fabric. So this is what I'm doing. And this is the most interesting part of this is probably the smallest stitch repeat I've ever written. Like, it's a 4-stitch repeat. And you just have to think about knitting in a totally different way when you try this stuff. So it's fun, it's different. I know I'm going to need some help to make it available to everybody.
to translate it into followable instructions.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so cool. It also reminds me of something that I've seen Nancy Marchant doing lately.
I'm a little bit inspired by what Nancy's doing.
Yeah,
We've been
she's
talking
got
about
these
this stuff a lot.
woven, multicolored
Yeah.
shawls and things going on too. That so cool. Your brain, Mary, your brain is amazing. I mean, all of your brains. Wow. Um, which brings us to time for audience questions. We've only got about 7 minutes left. So if you have a question, if you're in the audience and you want to raise your hand, or if you want to put your question in the chat, then please go ahead. Kathleen, I thought you were raising your hand, but that's a thumb.
So did I. I did not mean to do the thumb. I meant to raise the hand. My mistake. Yes, I clearly don't know how to use this iteration of Zoom. May I ask my question?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. I love all of the designers' work that we've got on the panel, but my question is really for Mary, and it's about fusion and fission knitting because you know, as we've already established, it's an incredible technique and it's wild and it can do so many really cool things. And I'm just wondering, like, where it came from. I'm assuming your brain, which is an incredible thing, but like, how what's the germination of that? Like, where how did it come out of the brain?
Okay, so the thing is, it didn't just come out. Like, it's taken like a lot of steps to get there. But first I learned to do slip stitches. And then my most inspirational designer is Lucy Hay. I don't know if you know her. She does beautiful Celtic cable work. So I learned slip stitches from her. I learned two color slip stitch cabling from her. And then she came out with a scarf called the Bane scarf. And that's reversible. It's got reversible cables. It has cable work. It looks a lot like my stuff in terms of the cables just travel around, but hers is one color. And when I saw what she did, I was able to translate that to a two color form. And then I was then just trying to figure out how to incorporate more colors. So that eventually became fusion knitting. And then I was trying to figure out how to incorporate more colors. And that's when I started knitting in a marl. And I practiced when I was cabling, I was practicing my cabling with a marl. And I just did a cable on one side of the fabric and I left it lying around. My husband picked it up and said, you can't see the cable through on the other side. And then it sort of just clicked for me that I could do a different design on each side of the fabric. And it's just been going from there. So that's a really short answer to that question. There were a lot of steps in between.
I just grabbed the link for the Lucy Haig Bane scarf.
It's beautiful.
And stuck it in chat, and I can see there is a line there, cables over garter for one thing, which is unusual because I think we're used to cables over reverse stockinette often. Anyway, this is fabulous. We're getting Corey's put her podcast link into the chat. Does anybody else have a question for any of our designers? Awkward silence.
I have a question, if
Yeah.
I can. I'm Emily, and I'm sorry I came in late, so I'm not sure if you already touched on this. But I'm curious for designers, where do you find the balance between learning new techniques and working other people's patterns and developing your own and really diving deep into the techniques that you need to have a really strong grasp on to do your own designs?
That's a great question. Anybody want to jump on that one?
There is no balance. Sorry, you guys. I'm not trying to, but like I'll be working at 1 in the morning. I'll be, driving in the car. I knit in the back row at church, like where, like I have to find time where I can find time to put it there. I literally am like a stay-at-home person. But this is what I do for my job. And I hear people say all the time that they'd love to quit their job so that they can knit full time. And they would, they want more time for knitting. And there's never enough time for knitting. Bottom line, even the people who we do this is our thing. Like I literally do it full time. I want more time. So, I think finding that balance about the passion that you love, anything that people do with passion that they love, that you always want to do it more. And so it is really hard. I can spend a lot of time, looking at shawl shapes right now. I'm just looking at tons of shawl shapes. I'm just out there trying to find the most unique and, but that is taking time away from everything else I do. And then there's this, guilt factor, like of not getting the other work done for those couple of hours when I'm spending that time researching, which is valuable research or whatever. But I'm not making jest of your question at all. I just think that we all wish we had a little bit more time to do a little knitting for myself and a little more teaching over here and a little, it's the balance. I think you do the best you can. I think Mary probably spends way more time than any of us developing her creative brain into, a brand new stitch pattern. And to me, that is incredible, but I don't spend time doing that. I don't seem to have that piece of, in my brain that says, let's develop something completely new and different. I think that her answer may be completely different on how she spends her time, but for me, I just want more time, and I wish I could sleep less, a lot less.
I second what Corey says, and that there's not enough time to knit everything you want. And to be honest, since I started designing, I don't think I've knit a single other pattern, because I don't have time to. But that doesn't mean I don't look at other patterns. And I'm not saying I'm trying to steal ideas, but like I'll see a different shawl shape or a different shape of something, and I'll be like, how does that translate into my work? And yeah, that's, looking at other people's work can be just inspirational in terms of just opens doors as to more things you can think about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Sorry, Sandra. I'm a tech editor, right? So I see hundreds of patterns and I have the ability to knit it in my head. And so I don't have to actually pull out the needles most of the time to be able to understand how something is made. So I feel like that's one slight edge over a lot of people. Not that I am cranking out any patterns, because I do spend more of my time editing than writing patterns these days. But yeah, I totally agree. We don't have enough time. Not enough time at all. Sandra, what were you going to add?
The only thing I was going to say is that we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? That it's that, like, we never copy what we see from other people, but we're certainly inspired by it. I mean, it's that, like, once I saw the cables on garter stitch, that's when I also, like, my most successful design was actually a cable on garter as well, but with a twist. And it's that, like, there's been so many brilliant crafters before us, and we can get inspired by them. I mean, I wouldn't have the brain either to come up with something brand new, but amazing to have those brains. But yeah, I think for me, I knit a pattern by somebody else when it's something brand new I've never seen before. So like when the first time I tried brioche, I wouldn't have known where to start. So then I picked up somebody else's pattern. But most of the time, yes, it's my own stuff that I'm working on.
Yeah. We are over time, technically, from what we've booked, but we have Rosie's got her hand up, and Marika had already asked a question in the chat. So unless anybody has to absolutely run off, I'm happy to just keep going for a few more minutes. Is that everybody cool with that? Awesome. Okay, Rosie, I will get to you in just a moment. Marika's question was, if there's a thing that you didn't have to do when you're making your projects, but you could just like wave a magic wand and have it be done, what is the thing that you would want to just be magically done, like blocking or weaving in ends or checking your gauge? What would be your thing? And hopefully this is a quick question.
Pictures. I'm going to jump in with that. Pictures. I struggle with that picture eye. And I think I'm taking great pictures until I get back to my computer and go, okay, trying to take those again. Yeah, pictures.
Yep. Anybody else? Oh,
Miles of stockinette. Right? I can't sit and just do miles of stockinette. So if I'm knitting a colorwork yoke or something that has, a big swath of stockinette, magic wand. That would be, I just want to get through that part so I can get to the fun whatever, or the cable or the colorwork or whatever it is. If there's a lot of stockinette somewhere, it just is so slow. And I know there are people that would knit stockinette all day. If you're that person, could you come live at my house?
I know that Marika's going to say you need a knitting machine.
I know. Way back in the day, I had an old one, plastic thing that worked, but it just takes time. That it can take a lot of time, and I would rather be doing the fun stuff or whatever. So
and yet
that
it's
would
hard
be
to sell a sweater that's actually only a yoke and leaves the rest of you naked.
that shows your bust. There's cropped and then there's cropped.
Yeah.
I'll answer, and mine is just seaming. I just hate seaming.
Talk to me, Mary. We'll work something out. I like seaming.
Oh, okay.
I'm that weird person.
That's good to know, Anne.
Yeah, I like seaming.
I think for me, it would be for gauge to never lie. Like every designer that I've worked with as a tech editor, and any garment that I've made, it never matches. My blocked gauge is always different than, like, my swatch gauge is always different from my actual project gauge. And yeah, gauge is the devil.
Not going to disagree there. Okay, Rosie, you have your question.
This isn't really a question so much as just a quick thing I wanted to say, and that is, I wish I could knit all the designs I want to knit, and I have a hard time. Like, I love listening to this today, and I have a hard time with, like, I want to support everybody, and I want to buy all the yarn to support everybody, but I'm at a phase in my life where I have a really lot of yarn. But this was very fascinating to listen to. And just to let you know, Corey, I do read your newsletter because this is where I found out about it, about this Zoom today. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for that, because I don't know how many people actually open the newsletters that we all send, with the yarn stores that all send them, with the yarn companies that all send them, and they all go in your, center column of your emails, and you're like, I don't have time to open all those. So I appreciate knowing that, it got opened. Thanks, Rosie. You're always a good supporter of everyone, though, always. So there should be no guilt on your end about any of that.
Oh, that's really lovely. I think that is, and Marilyn Everingham in the chat says I read all the newsletters too. I try to as well. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I'm just going to drop everybody's links into the chat again, and also the link for our event schedule. And I really, really want to say thank you all so much for coming out, especially for our designers. But also having an audience here is kind of key to making this whole thing work. We hope you've enjoyed today's designer video panel. Check out the Fasten Off Yarnalong schedule that I've posted for more events and activities. We are getting close to the New Year's Bonanza, and then that'll be wrapping up this year's Yarnalong, but the fun continues over in the inclusive yarn community as well. And there are links to that in various places. So thank you again all so much for joining us.
Thank you so
Well,
much,
thank you for having
Anne.
us.
Yeah, thank you so much. You
This
did a
is lovely.
great job as a little coordinator because no one talks as much as me. So if you can control that, for you, right? And you just, I just kept it rolling along. It's pretty good.
Well, thank you. I'm a conference planner in my day job, so it's my job to watch the time. But thank you all so much.